Mill Avenue Autonomous Uber. On March 18, 2018, in Tempe, Arizona, the night was clear and dry on Mill Avenue near Curry Road. A prototype Volvo XC90 SUV had been operating in autonomous mode for 19 minutes, traveling north at approximately 39 miles per hour. Elaine Hertzberg, 49 years old, was pushing a bicycle laden with shopping bags across 4 lanes of traffic outside the marked crosswalk. She had already crossed at least 2 lanes when the SUV approached. The self-driving system, developed by Uber's Advanced Technologies Group, detected an object 6 seconds before impact. It classified Hertzberg first as an unknown object, then as a vehicle, then as a bicycle. Each classification predicted a different path through the autonomy logic. 1 and 3/10 seconds before impact, the system determined emergency braking was required. The system wasn't designed to alert the human operator. Uber had disabled the Volvo's factory automatic emergency braking to prevent erratic behavior during testing. The Volvo struck Hertzberg at 39 miles per hour. The backup driver, Rafaela Vasquez, 44 years old, had been looking down at her personal phone, streaming the television show The Voice in the seconds before impact. She didn't brake. Tempe police arrived on scene. Hertzberg was transported but pronounced dead from her injuries. Uber immediately suspended autonomous testing in all 4 cities where it had deployed. The investigation that followed cut deep. NTSB telemetry showed the system had detected Hertzberg 6 full seconds before impact, but never triggered braking because emergency maneuvers had been disabled under computer control. The agency found Uber had no standalone operational safety division, no safety manager, and no formal safety plan for its autonomous program. The next year, federal regulators concluded the system's design hadn't included any consideration for jaywalking pedestrians. In 2020, a Maricopa County grand jury indicted Vasquez on negligent homicide. Uber itself wasn't charged. 3 years later, Vasquez pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of endangerment and was sentenced to 3 years of supervised probation. Uber's autonomous vehicle division was sold to Aurora Innovation in 2020. It was the first recorded pedestrian fatality involving a fully autonomous vehicle. Stevenson Expressway birthday Uber. On April 28, 2019, at 3:20 in the morning, southbound traffic on Interstate 55 near Damon Avenue in Chicago was light. A Hyundai sedan was traveling in the right lanes as an on-duty Uber. Jamie Poulos, 23, of Berwyn, was in the back seat with 2 friends, Anastasio Morales, 23, of Lyons, and Alex Carriot, 22. The 3 had been out in Boys Town, celebrating Poulos' 23rd birthday, and were heading home. Behind them, a white Infiniti sedan, driven by Rami Mataria, 22, of Homer Glen, was traveling at high speed in the same southbound lanes. Mataria had been drinking for hours. The Infiniti rear-ended the Uber Hyundai with severe force. The Hyundai burst into flames. Morales, in the back seat, managed to escape the burning car. Already on fire himself, he pulled the Uber driver and Carriot from the wreckage. He returned for Poulos. He couldn't free her. She was trapped in the burning vehicle and died inside. Illinois State Police, Chicago Fire Department, and paramedics arrived. Poulos was pronounced dead at the scene. Mataria fled the crash and flagged down a Lyft driver, who later told prosecutors he saw blood on Mataria's hand and smelled alcohol on him. The Lyft driver gave him a ride to a gas station in Oak Lawn anyway. Hours later, Mataria's blood alcohol level was found to be nearly 3 times the legal limit. Prosecutors said he had a documented history of reckless driving, including prior wrong-way incidents. At trial, the Lyft driver who had given Mataria a ride testified he heard him muttering, "What did I do?" during the ride from the crash scene. Mataria was charged with reckless homicide, aggravated DUI involving death, and leaving the scene of a crash causing death. Miami-Dade nightclub, Uber. On December 27, 2015, just days after Christmas, the intersection of Southwest 157th Avenue and Southwest 144th Street in Miami-Dade County was quiet. The posted speed limit was 35 miles per hour. Pablo Sanchez Jr., 20, was riding in the back of an Uber SUV with friends, heading home from a Miami nightclub. He was a graduate of Killian High School and attended Miami-Dade College. Approaching the same intersection at high speed was a vehicle driven by Alexander Chica, 21. Chica was intoxicated. His vehicle entered the intersection at roughly 70 miles per hour, twice the posted limit. Chica's vehicle slammed into the Uber SUV. The impact caused both vehicles to burst into flames. Sanchez was trapped in the back of the Uber and couldn't escape the fire. Miami-Dade fire rescue arrived at the scene. Sanchez was pronounced dead at the scene from the fire and impact injuries. Toxicology confirmed Chica had been driving under the influence. Speed reconstruction placed him at 70 in a 35 zone. Chica was charged with DUI manslaughter. Sanchez's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Uber Technologies, the Uber driver, and Chica, alleging that Uber's screening practices had contributed to the conditions of the ride. Highway 41, Lemoore Uber. In June 2019, on California State Highway 41 near Lemoore in Kings County, the road was a two-lane stretch through agricultural land. A Hyundai Elantra was traveling northbound. Derek Balderas, 36, was behind the wheel. He was an Uber driver returning home after dropping off a passenger in Lemoore. His shift was effectively over. Approaching from the opposite direction in the southbound lanes, a Hummer H2 driven by Marvin Vance Reese Sr., 60, was traveling at high speed. Reese crossed the center line. The Hummer crossed fully into the northbound lanes. The Hummer struck Balderas' Hyundai head-on. The Hyundai became engulfed in flames almost immediately. California Highway Patrol responded. Balderas was pronounced dead at the scene from the impact and fire. At arrest, Reese's blood alcohol concentration was 0.13, well above California's legal limit of 0.08. He had 5 prior DUI convictions on his record. At trial, prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder under California's implied malice doctrine, citing the prior convictions and his knowledge of the danger of driving impaired. Reese was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 5 years plus 45 years to life in California State Prison. Roseville Halloween Lyft. On the early morning of November 1st, 2014, the day after Halloween, westbound Interstate 80 near Roseville in Placer County, California, was a dark stretch of freeway. Shane Holland, 24, of West Sacramento, was riding home from a Halloween party with his boyfriend, Brady Lawrence, in a Lyft driven by 31-year-old Shanti Adhikari of Sacramento. The vehicle was a Toyota Camry. Ahead on Interstate 80 was another vehicle, a Kia, that had stalled in the travel lanes. Adhikari, approaching the stalled Kia at freeway speed, swerved to avoid it. The Camry lost control and slammed into 2 trees on the side of the freeway. Holland was killed in the impact. California Highway Patrol and Placer County Fire arrived. Holland was pronounced dead from his injuries. Brady Lawrence was hospitalized. In the days that followed, CHP determined that Adhikari's evasive maneuver and loss of control had caused the impact with the trees. The case became a landmark in the early debate over rideshare insurance coverage. At the time, it wasn't clear whether Lyft's policy fully covered passenger fatalities during a paid ride. Holland's death was the first recorded passenger fatality involving the Lyft service. The case prompted California regulators to formalize rideshare insurance requirements. Maspeth red light Lyft. On Sunday, June 13, 2021, at 3:50 in the morning, the intersection of Fresh Pond Road and Elliott Avenue in Maspeth, Queens, was quiet. Mohammed Hussein, 48, was working as a Lyft driver. He was a father of 3 who had been helping his brother-in-law pay for nursing school. He had a passenger in the car. Approaching the intersection from a cross street was a Ford Explorer driven by 22-year-old Eric Chimborazo of Brooklyn. Chimborazo had been drinking heavily. He was driving without a license and without insurance. Chimborazo ran the red light at the intersection. His vehicle slammed into Hussein's Lyft with enough force to send the Lyft and Hussein through a nearby brick wall. NYPD and FDNY paramedics arrived. Hussein was rushed to a Queens hospital where he was pronounced dead. His passenger sustained minor injuries. Chimborazo fled the scene but returned a short time later. At arrest, Chimborazo's blood alcohol level, tested 2 hours after the crash, measured at twice the legal limit. He had no driver's license and no insurance at the time of the crash. Chimborazo was charged with DWI, driving without a license, driving without insurance, and vehicular manslaughter. West Temple TRAX Uber. On September 14, 2022, at 7:54 in the morning, the intersection of West Temple and 700 South in downtown Salt Lake City was active with morning rush hour traffic. A UTA TRAX light rail train was traveling eastbound on 700 South through the crossing. Jalen Neal, 28, was a passenger in an Uber traveling southbound on West Temple. The Uber was a passenger sedan with 1 driver and Neal in the car. The Uber approached the intersection at an estimated 30 to 40 miles per hour. The signal was red for southbound West Temple traffic. The driver ran the red light. The Uber clipped the rear of the eastbound TRAX train. The brunt of the impact occurred on the passenger side of the vehicle, where Neil was seated. Bystanders ran to the vehicle. They found the driver uninjured. Neil wasn't responding and had stopped breathing. Salt Lake City Police, UTA security, and paramedics arrived. Neil was pronounced dead. Within hours, police confirmed the Uber driver had run the red light. Uber deactivated the driver from the platform and stated it would assist law enforcement. Salt Lake City Police pursued charges against the Uber driver for running the red light and the resulting fatality. The 600 South TRAX station was temporarily closed for investigation. Thornton I-25 Uber. In April 2026, at around 3:45 in the morning, Interstate 25 near Thornton, Colorado, was a stretch of dark, low-traffic highway. A previous crash had occurred minutes earlier, and vehicles were stopped in or near the travel lanes. Chris Cerna, 30, of Thornton, was a passenger in an Uber on the way home. His sister, Iris Cerna, would later describe him to reporters as a kind, helpful person who was always there for his family. Cerna's Uber arrived at the scene of the earlier crash. Cerna saw other drivers stranded and got out of the Uber to help. As Cerna and others were on the freeway lanes attempting to assist, a Mercedes-Benz driven by a 27-year-old woman approached the scene at highway speed. The Mercedes plowed into the crash scene. It struck the previous crash driver and then struck Cerna. Colorado State Patrol and paramedics arrived. The previous crash driver was seriously injured. Cerna was pronounced dead at the scene. In the days that followed, Colorado State Patrol determined the Mercedes driver hadn't slowed appropriately for the existing crash scene. The Uber driver, who had dropped Cerna at the scene, became the subject of separate review after questions arose about whether the rideshare driver had abandoned passengers on the interstate. Charges against the Mercedes-Benz driver were pursued by Colorado State Patrol. The case prompted CSP to remind motorists that the safest action at a freeway crash scene is to remain in the vehicle and call 911 rather than exit onto live travel lanes. Iris Cerna told reporters her brother had died doing what he had always done, trying to help someone in trouble. Kelly Drive illegal turn. On August 15, 2024, at 3:22 in the afternoon, Kelly Drive in Philadelphia ran along the east bank of the Schuylkill River, a corridor that had carried summer cyclists and joggers since the early afternoon. The intersection of Kelly Drive and Reservoir Drive sat in a constant flow of midday traffic. Stephen Tyree Moultrie, 41, was a passenger in a Nissan Altima, working as an Uber. He was a Tuskegee University graduate and a longtime member of the Phi Beta Sigma fraternity's Philadelphia-based Nu Sigma chapter. He had just visited a Greek picnic over the previous weekend. The Uber driver approached the intersection and made an illegal turn across oncoming traffic. The Altima spun across the intersection. It struck a BMW sedan that had been traveling lawfully through the crossing. The impact crushed the Altima. Then, the Altima collided with a third vehicle as it spun to a stop. Philadelphia police and fire rescue arrived within minutes. The Uber driver was extracted with severe injuries and transported to a hospital. Moultrie was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators on scene confirmed the illegal turn was the cause. In the months that followed, the family filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Philadelphia Common Pleas Court through Klein and Spector. Teresa Moultrie, Stephen's mother, became the lead plaintiff. The lawsuit accused Uber of fraudulently marketing itself as a safer alternative to other types of transportation, alleging that Uber used only rudimentary background checks and didn't interview drivers or ask for references. Uber moved to compel arbitration. The case continued through the Philadelphia court system as of the most recent reporting. Family members told reporters Moultrie had been initiated into Phi Beta Sigma in 2015 and had built nearly a decade of fraternal community before that ride. If documentation like this matters to you, subscribe and suggest the next topic in the comments below.